As we all know, out of all the brawlers that exist in Brawl Stars, there are some that players have simply forgotten. Whether it's because they're hard to play, because of their mechanics, or simply because, well, they're just not liked by many. That's why today we'll take a look at the least played brawlers in all of Brawl Stars. And yes, there are some that you probably don't even remember how their gameplay was. To start off this list, we have Sprout, who has a 0.41% usage rate in matches, which is a pretty low usage percentage. Yes, but not as low as the ones we'll see in this video. Sprout is pretty forgettable because of how complex it is to play. And here comes the Sprout main in the comments to tell me that this brawler really isn't that hard to play, but let's be honest, the fact that its basic attack bounces can make it a bit complicated. Yes, if we notice it in a match, it's not like its basic attack reaches a specific area. The same thing happens with the walls, which, while it's a strategy that can be pretty useful at higher ranks. If we look at it in other situations, well, I think the wall. It's an ultimate that maybe doesn't look as destructive compared to other ultimates in the game. There are ultimates that destroy everything, Brawl Stars. But Sprout doesn't seem powerful because it's just a wall, which may be why people don't like it as much. For many people, you know, dopamine, and the same thing happens with its hypercharge, which is basically a wall that deals damage. But even though Sprout has a very low usage rate in the game, it's definitely not the brawler with the lowest. Well, in our next spot, we have a tie with quite a few brawlers since we have Mao, Jong, and Hank, each with a 0.40% usage rate in matches. We'll talk a bit about these brawlers in order. To start, we have Mao, a brawler who was leaked before his release, so there wasn't much excitement about him. On the other hand, this brawler has a pretty interesting gameplay style that's not for every player. Since instead of hitting your basic attack by aiming directly, you have to hit it a little to the side so it deals the maximum possible damage. Yes, it's a bit complicated for new players to understand. The same thing happens with his ultimate, an ultimate that can deal a lot of damage. While it can be surprising at some point in the match, and it can be quite annoying in reality, if you're not in melee range, it's kind of useless. Also, in Brawl Stars, assassins are often brawlers that are used quite a lot. Against Mao, these brawlers make his ultimate look useless, and some others just make Mao not that useful in matches. Now, moving on to Jong, we also have a pretty interesting brawler, since this brawler is a support brawler. Even more so, since his movement mechanics and healing with his basic attack and his ultimate make this brawler not stand out over others when it comes to gameplay. Yes, we know that in Brawl Stars, many people aim for a flashy triple kill, which is basically showing off in gameplay. But Jong isn't a brawler that's played like that. Jong is a brawler that's more useful for supporting the team composition, and this really annoys most Brawl Stars players. Also, since he's a relatively new brawler, in quotes, there are a lot of people who haven't unlocked him yet because he's one of the latest in the game. And on the other hand, we have Hank. With Hank, we have a story similar to Jong's, but different, since Hank is not a support brawler. He's a tank in every sense of the word, but he has a pretty complex mechanic, which is charging his basic attacks or being able to heal yourself, as we all already know about Hank's basic attacks. Charging them more will make them cause more damage. This is very hard to balance for many new players, because if they don't know that the brawler can kill in one shot, they're most likely going to end up frustrated when playing this brawler. Believe me, there have been times when Hank has been super strong, either because of his hypercharge or because of some bug the brawler had. But nowadays, since he's not that strong anymore and actually requires skill to be played, he's not a brawler that catches the attention of many players. But if we're gonna talk about skill, let's talk about the next brawlers in our video. For the next brawlers, we have Charlie. We also have Lumi and Ollie. All these brawlers have a 0.37% usage rate in matches, which is quite low. With Charlie, we have a pretty interesting story about the game. Charlie was actually one of the most broken brawlers in the entire history of Brawl Stars. This made her a brawler that at first didn't require any skill at all, but then Supercell nerfed her and people said, wait, what do you mean this brawler needs skill now? Well, I'm just going to abandon her. And from then on, Charlie was a brawler that was pretty much abandoned, and honestly, she's also not a very destructive brawler when it comes to gameplay. Her hypercharge is just 3 little spiders. Seriously, that shouldn't count. Supercell is ripping us off with this one. For our next brawler, Lumi, basically the same thing happened. She was an extremely broken brawler, a brawler with mechanics completely different from what we've seen with other brawlers. This can get a bit complicated for new players who don't know the brawler perfectly. If you encounter this brawler in a match and the player knows how to use her, she can still cause a lot of destruction. But most players nowadays have only leveled her up because she used to be overpowered, and today, well, you need a bit of brains to play with this brawler. On the other hand, we have Ollie, and honestly, it's the same story. He got nerfed and simply fell into oblivion. Continuing with the video, we have another tie, what a surprise. And we're going to include the first legendary brawler of this video, which is Draco, who is tied with Perth with a 0.35% usage rate in matches. Now, let's talk about Draco. Honestly, this is a very interesting case. He's a legendary brawler, yes, and he's been in the game for quite a while now. But since he's a legendary brawler, honestly, it's pretty hard to get him. When it comes to popularity among legendary brawlers, maybe he's not one of the legendary brawlers you'd want to have. On one hand, we have Kenji with gameplay that looks great for TikToks and looks super pro to use. We have a cat that's insanely annoying in survival and only takes 3 brain cells to use. And then you realize that Draco? Actually, it's a pretty average or pretty simple option to choose for a legendary brawler. I mean, a brawler that turns into a dragon and deals damage. Yeah, destructive, sure, but it's not as pro as the other brawlers. It's not that flashy. But on the other hand, we have Pearl, a brawler that I really don't think has connected with the community since she came out. While there are a few Pearl fans who might use this brawler, most people probably don't use her, since her gameplay is very similar to PAN's, I mean, in terms of her bullets. The only change is the heat mechanic, which still involves heat. It's a mechanic that can be not very interesting and more annoying than fun, since obviously all the heat does is increase in relation to not attacking. And tell me, which brawler in the game forbids you from attacking? And the same thing happens with his ult. The ult is literally like, oh, okay, you're gonna have to wait another 20 hours to use the ult in a useful way. Also, the design of this brawler, well, that's why and more, Pearl is a pretty forgotten brawler. For our next spot in this video, we have another tie. And in this spot, we have Ashe, and we also have Eevee, both of whom have a 0.34% usage rate in matches. To start with Ashe, I would say that this is a brawler that requires skill. A whole lot of skill, and it's not an ultra mega destructive brawler. I mean, it's not the brawler that's going to break walls. It's not the brawler that's going to be running all over the place. This is one of the characteristics of being a brawler that requires skill. Ashe's gameplay is pretty complex for someone who only plays the game casually, even though his design is quite nice. I say this still doesn't make him interesting to the community. But on the other hand, that's not the case with Eevee, whose gameplay isn't super challenging. In fact, it's pretty forgettable. The brawler's attack just throws 3 eggs in a special egg that spawns minions. You don't need to do much with this brawler in a match. Also, its unique feature is being able to fly over water. Many brawlers can already do that nowadays, so this brawler doesn't really have anything special anymore that would make you play it over other brawlers. Continuing with our video, let's move on to 2 other brawlers. Now we're going to talk about Pam, and we're also going to talk about Bonnie. Both of them have a 0.31% usage rate in matches, starting with Pam. This brawler is kind of strange. First, as we already know, she has this gameplay style similar to Pearl, which, well, is actually quite interesting. And on the other hand, she's a brawler that benefits from staying in a specific spot. I mean, she's quite a camper type brawler. The whole match is about staying in one place, holding a zone, and that's why PAM isn't really a standout brawler, as we already know. This thing about dopamine really affects the people who play Brawl Stars, and well, playing PAM is simply about placing a turret, healing, and that's it. And on the other hand, her design is a walking meme. And on the other hand, if we're gonna talk about Bonnie, we have a brawler who isn't going to offer us a different experience from what another sniper can offer. Even though it's a brawler that only has a basic attack, yes. We've already seen this in other brawlers. Even though it has a pretty wide range, it's not like we don't already have another brawler with this function. Even though she's a bit slow when it comes to gameplay, we've already seen this with a brawler that has range and is a bit slow, and I think it works much better than Bonnie. Even though she has the super, where she turns into a girl and launches herself at enemies, the truth is that while at lower trophies she can be totally devastating, at higher trophies people start to counter you one way or another. And honestly, the risk of the super just isn't worth it at all. Even though Bonnie isn't a bad brawler at all, she's a brawler who might get overshadowed by many other brawlers in the game. For our silver medal in this video, we have a brawler that many of you might have forgotten. And for this ranking, we have Sam with a 0.30% usage rate in matches, since Sam actually has all the characteristics to be a forgettable brawler. First of all, we have gameplay that is very extremely challenging. You have to throw the super, then chase after the super, move from here to there, and you really need to know how to move. I mean, honestly, to know how to play with Sam, you really need to know a lot about the brawler. And honestly, this gets overshadowed by other brawlers in the game that don't require as much skill to play. Even though this brawler has a lot of health, yes, but he doesn't have enough attack to counter tanks. In the same way, the only way to play with this brawler is to have this star power, because if you don't have the star power, you're definitely not going to use him at all. On top of that, let's say that actually this brawler has a pretty simple design. Look, he's just a bald guy. It's nothing special. It's not like we haven't seen this somewhere else in the world. So for all these reasons and more, Sam is definitely forgotten. To wrap up this video, let's discuss the most forgotten brawler in Brawl Stars history. This brawler is Lola with a 0.28% usage rate in matches. And look, this brawler actually doesn't have bad characteristics to be a viable brawler in the game. The brawler's traits aren't new. Colt, for example, is similar. Its design isn't unattractive either. In fact, many people create fan art of this brawler. This brawler appears in skins that aren't ugly, but they make this brawler quite forgettable. Well, it's just that its gameplay really isn't challenging. As I already mentioned, we have a basic attack similar to Colt's, but. If we're gonna talk about its super. Its only function is to duplicate the brawler. That's the function of the super. What for? Does it help you deal more damage, make plays? Maybe to cover a larger area, put this clone behind walls. Put this clone in some area that's inaccessible for the brawler, and not sacrifice health. Use gadgets, star powers, and hypercharges so that the clone, well, has many more functions. But most likely when you play Lola, you'll put the clone on top of yourself and try to keep the clone on you for as long as possible. If this makes Lola's gameplay pretty boring, seriously? I mean, that's why Lola becomes the least used brawler of all. Brawl Stars, have you ever forgotten any of these brawlers? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, I'll share more top Brawl Stars lists. Also, I'm sharing my most recent video, which you might really enjoy. See you next time. Bye.